The AK-47 is probably one of the most recognizable and widespread firearm in the world. It's been around since 1947 and is the standard infantry weapon for 50 countries. It's estimated that around 100 million AK-47s and its variations circle around the world. Now before we begin, we'd like to ask you if you could click that subscribe button to help us out. We'd appreciate it. AK-47 is a Russian invention by the senior sergeant Mikhail Kalashnikov. He admired the weapons made by the Nazis. The AK was made from the design of STG-44 or Sturmgewehr 44 and others. The AK was one of a kind, and the praise is from its simplicity. It was designed for an all-around ease of use, easy to repair, and if it ever jammed, it was very easy to unjam. The AK-47 was simple and relatively easy to produce, so the Soviet Union loved it and began exporting the weapon in great numbers. The Soviet Union made so much money from exporting the weapon that Kalashnikov received special treatment in the USSR and later Russia for the rest of his life. Now being the most produced firearm and one of the most reliable weapons in the world, the AK-47 was heavily adopted by armies, militias and terrorists. There are about 50 armies in the world that use the AK-47 to this day. Some of these countries are Afghanistan, China, Finland, Vietnam, North Korea, Russia, and even some special forces in the US use it. Most of the AK-47s that the armies use are not real AK-47s, but a copy that's built on the AK platform. The US Army, or People's Republic of China, used a copy of AK-47 that's called Type 56 until the 1980s and was later replaced by the Type 81, but the military reserve and the armed police in China still use the Type 56 rifle. The Type 56 rifle was so cheap and reliable that lots of countries bought it from China. One of these countries was Finland. And ordered 100,000 Type 56s from China for their reserve troops, but would later on be discarded for long-term storage, and they changed the weapon to the Russian AK-74M for the volunteer groups. AK-62, which is a Finnish copy of the AK-47, would replace the AK-47 infantry had as weapons. Most AK-47s that are used in the army wouldn't see war, but in war-torn countries like Vietnam and Afghanistan, the AK-47 was and is the most common weapon there. During the Vietnam War, the Viet Cong forces were supplied by the Communist forces. Russia and China supplied the Viet Cong with AK-47s, uniforms and equipment. The Viet Cong used the AK-47 during the whole war, but after the war, Viet Cong eventually fell and the People's Army of Vietnam regained control. The AK-47 was still in use, and it's still used to this day by their army. Now this doesn't mean that many AK-47s haven't seen war. In fact, the AK-47 has killed more than any other weapon ever has, and most of these are from conflicts in Africa and the Middle East. In the Middle East, both the insurgent groups and the army used them. During the war in Afghanistan, both sides used the AK-47. Most of the AK-47s come from the Soviet invasion in the 80s, when the US supplied the insurgent forces with Soviet-designed weapons, like the AK-47. When the war in Afghanistan in 2000 started, a lot of the insurgents and the Afghan army picked up the age-old AK-47s from the Soviet invasion and began using them. The AK-47 was phased out of service for the Afghan National Army in 2008, but it's still used by some regular units. Now, the AK-47 is still widely used by many armies and insurgents groups, and it's one of the most replicated weapons platforms out there. But what do you think? Is the AK platform better than the AR platform? Let us know in the comments!